Good morning, everybody. Hopefully, today's class will be as insightful and interactive as all the classes we have had so far. Today's class is very important. Because it's so important, I want all of you to pay undivided attention. Yes, the class needs your full attention because it has a lot to offer. You have a lot to learn from it. We're going to start with document design. Okay? Document design. Sometimes people say it's not just what you say, it's hard to say it. I can say that in a different way. In technical writing, presentation matters. It's not just what you say. It's not just what you say. It's not just the writing. It's not just writing clearly. It's not just writing um, 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 in a concise way. Is not just writing with your audience in mind. Document design is very important. Okay, how you design your document is very important. There are principles you need to follow to come up with great technical documents every time in terms of design. Whether you're writing a user manual, an informal proposal, a complete letter, you have to deal with document design. You have to deal with document design. So we're going to learn some of the principles. I'm going to first play for you this video. Pay attention, and after you finish watching it, I may ask you to tell me what you have learned from it and how you intend on applying what you have learned. And afterwards, I have a second video that I will play for you. Sometimes it's really good not to get new info from just one source. You try to get them from at least two sources. You can compare and contrast. That will allow you to use your new knowledge with confidence. And after we're done with um, document design principles today, I'll be talking about technical writing style. Technical writing style. All these things you're going to learn today. All the things you're going to learn today are applicable to everything you have to do for this class, to all the things you have to write for this class, and to all the documents you may end up, or you will write, as we say, instead of you may end up writing, you will write in the workplace. I strongly believe that will happen. So you will have to deal with the design. You will have to deal as well with style. So that's make again today's class very, 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 very important. Okay, everybody, let's start. I'm going to play the video right there. Pay attention.
In this video lecture, we're going to talk about principles of document design. This is an elementary thing that you need to know if you're going to be a technical communicator or interactive designer, or, matter of fact, if you're going to work in just about anything at all where you're going to need to create documents. There are four general principles that you need to know. They are called the CRAP principles for contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. These four principles were invented by a person named Robin Williams. No, not that Robin Williams, a different one. They appear for the first time in the Non-Designer's Design book. These are basic ideas. If you really get into document design, graphic design, and the like, you'll find more and other very more sophisticated ideas. But these CRAP principles are really excellent. They're easy to remember, and they're very useful. So that's why we're talking about them. Let's define what they mean. Contrast. Contrast is making sure things don't blend into each other. So if it appears on the page or screen, it needs to stand out and not become part of the background. Repetition. Any visual element that appears on a screen or page needs to be repeated over and over again. So examples of formatting need to be repeated. That's how documents gain cohesion. They stick together. They look like they are part of a set. They belong to a visual, for example, any organization will have a visual identity program, and all the documents from that organization will look somehow similar. That's an example of repetition. We have alignment. Alignment is putting things on a grid. Most technical communication documents are laid out vertically and horizontally. If we start going onto strange angles, that gets more into sophisticated document design or perhaps fine art. But generally speaking, we're going to align our elements on a grid so that people can follow along very easily. Then we have proximity. Proximity means putting things that are related together close together. Let's see how these all play out on an actual page. Here's an example of contrast where the red arrows are pointing. I'm going to give you an example of it blown up. So the weight systems text and the main text that's following. Notice there's a lot of contrast between the two. Now yes, there is contrast between the main body text and the heading text in black and the background in white. That counts as contrast, definitely. But look at the contrast between the text that I'm pointing to. We have text that is a different size. So the heading text is taller, wider. We also have difference in weight. So the heading text is bold, the main body text is not. Is what we call light face. Then we also have different letter shapes. So if you look at the different letters, for example, look at the E in weight. Notice where the crossbar is. Notice how round that E is. Then look at an E in conventional, the fifth letter N. Notice the E there is kind of tall. It's a squashed and skinny. The crossbar is a lot higher up than in the weight systems E. So letters are shaped differently, and that's a way of creating contrast. Here's another example of contrast in this table down at the bottom. Take a look at the red arrow. What contrast do you see between the main text on the left and the Table 1 Weight Systems Inspections on the right? Well, there are a couple of different ones. For example, the size is different, the weight is different, the fonts are different. So if you look at the main text and the heading text, again, the letters are different shapes. Let's compare between the elements pointed at through the purple arrow, the weight systems inspections and the percent of divers inspecting this item. What's the contrast there? Well, there's a lot of repetition. They're both boldface, they're both the same font, but the size is different. It's a subtle form of contrast, but it is some contrast. Take a look at the blue arrow then, where it's pointing to stitching condition and percent of divers. What contrast do you see there? The size is very similar, but the weight is different. That's, again, subtle contrast, but it is contrast. Then where the green arrow is, the other physical damage and the word functions, take a look at those. The letters are very similar sizes, but one is a different font than the other is. They're both light face, but again, they have a whole lot of contrast because of the letter shapes that are being used. Those are examples of contrast. Let's talk repetition. Everything I've circled here is an example of repetition. If you look at the headings, look at the size of those words. They're all the same font. They're all the same size. They're all bold. Look at the amount of space between that heading and the following text. It's all exactly the same. So we also have the same thing going on here. There's exactly the same amount of space between the paragraph that's ending and the following heading. Those are examples of repetition. We also have a good example of repetition down here at the bottom. Now, this is a page from a magazine that I scanned in. It's a very basic page, but still it counts. This thing is what you call a verso page. A verso is your left-hand side, and recto is the right-hand side. So right here, where that green line is, that's where we have the gutter. That is where the page comes together for the binding. So the page we're looking at is the left hand if you were opening up the magazine. Again, that's the verso, V-E-R-S-O page. And on the right-hand side, we have the recto page. So I'm going to blow up this example. It shows you what appears at the very bottom, because I know it's a little hard to read. It says 32, January, February 2009, then some blank space, alert diver, and a URL. On every every verso page, this is going to, same thing is going to appear. It'll have the page number in the same spot. It'll have the month that is issued in the same spot, and then it'll have that URL in the same spot. This is an example of repetition. Let's look at alignment next. Take a look at where all these arrows are pointing. I'm pointing at the very beginning of every paragraph. Please notice, how much indentation is there at the beginning of the paragraph? The answer? 0. There is no indentation. So this is an example of repetition, but it's also an example of alignment. All these first lines are aligned with the left-hand edge of that particular text column. All the text itself is just straight up aligned with that column. We're also doing the same thing on the right-hand side. This is what we call full justification. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's an example of alignment. So our alignment going on here. Check out the bulleted list here and the bulleted list here. Note, those bullets are all lined up with each other. So if I draw a straight line down from the very top set of bullets, it will intersect perfectly with the line from the very bottom line of bullets. You want to make sure all your bullets, all your numbers, all your indentations, they are all done exactly the same amount. That's alignment. We also have alignment going on here in this table. Notice, centered. Centered text is also aligned. That counts. So you can have left alignment, right alignment, center alignment. Finally, proximity. Take a look at the areas where I'm pointing here. Blow these up a little so you can see them better. Notice the amount of space that's going on. The idea here is that things that are related should be closer together. So the heading that says weight systems and the text that follows it, they are related to each other very closely. They belong physically on the page, on the screen, close together. On the box and below, though, that little exploded area, you look down, the text, then it stops that section, then it begins a new section. That big space indicates, okay, we've come to the end of a main idea, we are moving on to a new main idea.
Okay, everybody. So what do you think of the video that you just...
Now that we've talked about the overarching...
what do you think of the video you just watched? Hello? What do you think of the video you just watched?
I think it was really good to design the
Okay.
design layout to make things easily readable, you know, I guess, yeah, easily readable, distinctive subjects, topics, what have you. You're not confused about layout or anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Remember, you talk about the 4 principles of document design. So do you see how you will use the learned knowledge, you know, while you working on your user manual, on your class project, and your, do you see a room for you to use some of the things you have just learned?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, great, Casey. Who else?
I would say yes, that is that the documents design principle has an excellent combination of procedure and how things have to be organized on either your work project or any type of document that you're gonna proceed.
Remember, it talk about the principle of contrast. Sometimes contrast is very important. Alignment, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Alignment is very important. Proximity, you know, all these things. So when you design a document, you have to think it through. You have to have this principle in mind. Does that make sense? Sometimes people always say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Yes or no? You know,
yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
That are related, the way you put them together. You know what I mean? We show that, you know, instead of just saying it visually, that will be shown. These 4 principles are very important, and I think the best. I'll make these videos available to you. In fact, the recording will be available to you. You get access to the video that was just played for you. Watch the video again, and after you finish watching the video, look at the professional technical documents provided to you. Look at them with the 4 principles, with the first principles you just watch. Okay, as a reminder, I'm going to show you the 4 principles again. I'm not going to play the video. I'm going to put the four principles on the screen for you. So when you look at example of technical documents,
if you want to eat healthy and feel your best,
should be in your mind. So
in this video lecture, we're going to talk about principles of document design.
I'm going to put this up with 4 principles again.
This is an elementary thing that you need to know if you're going to be a technical communicator or interactive designer, or, matter of fact, if you're going to work in just about anything at all where you're going to need to create documents. A person named Robin Williams.
Okay, voila. The principle of contrast, the principle of repetition, the principle of alignment, the principle of proximity. Okay, there is a book right here. It's not expensive. If you're interested, you have money, you can go online and buy this book. If you buy this book, you will end up knowing these principles more deeply. Okay? You're going to see example after example of these principles in technical documents. Let me put that again. One of the principles is contrast. Contrast. Another key principle is a repetition. The third one is alignment, and the fourth one is proximity. Okay, so this as you can get it for $3. It's not expensive at all. So make sure you buy it if you can. A used book, okay, and that will allow you to get to know all those 4 principles with more depth. But the key is just not just learning them, but applying them. Where do you want to show contrast? Where do you want to use the principle of repetition in the document? Where do you want to apply alignment? Where do you want to apply proximity? You know, when you know something really well, using it is very easy. Even in your dream, you can use it. Okay, so now we're done with that. I'm going to play, give me 1 second. I'm going to play a second video for you. Give me 1 second. 1 second. I'm gonna get it right there. I'm going to play a second video for you. Everybody pay attention. We about document design. So I'm going to take this out. And here I'm going to put this. Everybody watch me.
Throughout the course so far, I've highlighted various ways in which technical writing follows different standards and requirements than academic writing does. Nowhere is the difference between technical and academic writing clearer than in the area of document design, though. My guess is that you haven't thought much about the design of documents you've written in school up to this point. Maybe you paid attention to elements like heading and page numbering, but if you did, it was probably because you had a teacher who based your grade in part on those elements. Beyond that, I'm guessing you didn't think much about the way your document looked on the page. And that's not surprising, because document design isn't a big part of academic writing. It's a very big part of technical writing, though. In fact, document design is so important in this field that many professionals have moved away from the term technical writing, favoring instead the term technical communication. One of the reasons behind that change is just the acknowledgement that technical writers are concerned with a lot more than just writing. They have to be concerned with every aspect of the documents they're producing, which means they have to pay attention to document design. As with everything else in technical writing, good document design is really about your readers. Technical writers aren't designing their documents to be beautiful. They're designing them to be user-friendly and easy to read and navigate. And it's important to understand that when I say document design, I'm not just talking about the appearance of the document. I'm talking about things like the organization of the document, the way it's put together, even how it's produced, whether it's an online document or a print document, whether it's bound or loose leaf, what kind of material it's printed on, etc. All of these elements contribute to the design of your document. I'm not going to cover all of these elements in this lecture, but I'll point you again to Chapter 5 as a very good resource for thinking about document design in general. What I'm going to focus on in this lecture are the elements of document design that apply specifically to your instructional manual assignment. That means I'm not going to cover the principles of online document design, and I won't really touch on some of the navigational elements that you tend to see in longer documents, like a table of contents or an index and appendices, etc. The elements of design I want you to focus on for this assignment specifically are how to use white space, how to manage line length, and how to design effective headings. I started this lecture by pointing out that technical writing is concerned about more than just words. There's no clearer demonstration of that than the fact that I'm about to spend a few minutes talking about blank space. As writers, we tend not to pay much attention to blank space. Blank space is literally defined by the absence of writing. But blank space is extremely important in document design. And its importance comes from two factors, I think. First, white space is very helpful for organizing a document. And second, white space has a positive psychological effect in that it makes a document more pleasing to read and easier on the eyes. Look at the following examples, both taken directly from Chapter 5 in your textbook. In this example, the lack of white space makes the document almost overwhelming to the reader, and not in a good way. Frankly, it's kind of exhausting just thinking about having to read a document like this. It's like a mountain of text with no significant use of white space to break it up or organize it in any way. Now look at this version of the same document. I think you'd agree that this document looks much more readable, much more manageable to the reader. Granted, there are some other design changes in the second version of the document, like the use of headings, which we'll get to later. But a big part of the improvement in readability here comes from the effective use of white space. Technical writers actually talk about two different kinds of white space. There's passive space, which refers to blank spaces outside the main text area of your document and that aren't part of that main text area, like the margins around the text in a print document, for example. And then there's active space, which refers to blank spaces within the main text area, like spaces between paragraphs or spaces around headings. Both of these forms of white space are important in the design of your document, though as the name implies, active space will probably require more active work and thought on your part. For passive space, your main consideration, if you're making a print document, is going to be your page margins. You've probably never thought much about margins, but they're actually very important in providing the boundaries of your document area. In general, you want to use what the textbook calls clear and generous margins. Very small margins can make the text area overwhelm the page, so you want margins of at least 1 inch all the way around. The textbook doesn't talk about the maximum size for margins, and the implication could be that the bigger the margin, the better. I actually disagree with that approach. Margins that are too generous can make the text area diminish, giving the impression that you don't have much to say. We talked a little bit about how excessive blank space can be a bad choice for a resume, for example. You don't want your resume to look empty. That's not as serious a concern with a document like an instruction manual, but I still think it's a good idea to avoid excessively large margins. 1.5 inches is probably the biggest margin you want to use on most print documents. Active space, as I've already mentioned, refers to the strategic use of blank space inside the text area of the document. And here's where the organizing power of blank space really becomes evident. Active space in a document is very useful in grouping information and moving the reader through your document. Look back at the example email we viewed a few minutes ago. This version of the email uses active space very effectively, and the result is not just that the document's less overwhelming to look at, but also that the organization of ideas is much easier to see and to follow. There are many ways to use active space effectively, and the textbook presents 3 specific pieces of advice in this area. First, try to use headings frequently throughout the document, with a blank space before the heading to indicate a break in the information. Notice in this example how the space before the heading sort of signals to the reader that a new section of information is beginning. Notice also that there's no blank space between the heading and the text that follows it. You want the heading and the text grouped together, and the way you accomplish that is by adding active space before the heading, but not after. Since headings are usually shorter than the text that follows, there's also often good active space on the line with the heading. Second, try to use bulleted lists from 3 or more parallel points. If you list several points within a sentence, that sentence will likely be very long and suffer from information overload. But if you break up those items into a bulleted list, they'll be much easier to follow. Since bulleted lists are usually indented, most word processors will indent them automatically, they also create additional active space that helps organize the information. Numbered lists and instructions can serve the same purpose. Third, use either a blank line or an indentation to separate paragraphs. You've probably never thought about the indentation at the beginning of a paragraph as active space, but that's exactly what it's for. Even a standard half-inch indentation can signal to the reader that the previous paragraph, and thus the previous idea, is over and a new one is beginning. In technical writing, it's more common to leave a full blank line of space between paragraphs, but the idea and the effect is the same. It offers the reader a break and also signals to the reader how your information is organized. The second point I want to cover, the importance of managing line length effectively, is closely related to the use of blank space. Too many long lines of text will reduce the amount of blank space available on the page. But it's not that simple. Too many short lines of text, especially too many short lines in a row, can lead to an excess of blank space, which can make your document appear empty, but which can also be fatiguing to a reader, since it forces their eyes to move back and forth more quickly. So your best bet is to use what the book calls a medium line length. Obviously, you can't control your line length completely, since it depends somewhat on the amount of content you have. So in practice, you'll probably have lines of different lengths. Some short lines, some lines of medium length, hopefully not too many very long lines. And actually, that difference in line lengths leads to another design principle. The textbook suggests always having what's called a ragged right margin. In other words, you don't want all of the lines on the page to end right at the right margin. That's a feature known as full justification, and it's the way most books are printed. In technical writing, you want to avoid full justification, opting instead for left justification, in which all the lines on the page line up on the left margin, but they don't line up on the right margin. Again, if you manage your line length well, you'll end up naturally with a ragged right margin, as long as you don't accidentally turn on the full justification feature in your word processing program. The third design principle, and the last one I want you to think about for right now, is the use of headings. Headings are actually an extremely important design element in all technical writing, not just in the instruction manual. You used headings on your resume, and you'll probably use them on all of the other major assignments in this class. If you've read Chapter 5 already, you know that the chapter spends quite a bit of time on the discussion of how to design and use effective headings. I'm not going to cover everything from that section, though all of it is important and you should definitely read that section very carefully. I'm actually going to focus on one of the major ideas from that section, namely the idea that you should create a pattern for your headings and stick to it. Probably the most important characteristic of good document design in general is consistency. You don't want your basic design patterns to change throughout the document. That means if you format one heading using a particular font, a particular size, particular indentation, etc., then all of the headings, or at least all of the headings of the same level, we'll come back to that in a second, should be formatted in exactly the same way. As long as you create a clear pattern for the format of your headings and stick to that pattern, you actually have a lot of flexibility concerning your specific formatting choices. There's no hard rule concerning which font you use or how large you make your headings, as long as you follow the pattern consistently. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some general design principles you might consider following when making your headings. Some of those guidelines are more or less common sense. For example, you generally want your headings to be either larger or more distinctive than the text which follows the heading. That's probably really obvious to you. But other guidelines are a little more specific and might not occur to you naturally. For example, many technical documents use what's called a serif font for the main text. Something like Times New Roman, for example. In other words, a font that has serifs, the little lines on the bottom of it. But then uses a sans serif font like Arial for headings. You might also use color to make a heading more distinctive, though you should almost certainly not use color in the main text. You might want to have multiple levels of headings, what the textbook calls a heading hierarchy. In that case, you want the size of the font you use for a heading to reflect its level in the hierarchy. If you have a main heading for a section and then 2 or 3 subheadings inside that section, the main heading should be larger than the subheadings. And you also generally want more blank space above a heading than below it, as we've already talked about, in order to group the heading visually with the text which it's introducing. Those are all good principles that you should consider whenever you're making headings. I've covered a lot of specific details here, so you may be feeling a little overwhelmed. If you are, please relax. I'm not expecting your documents to exhibit professional level design at this point. What I do expect is that you start thinking about design as a factor in the success of any document you create. And the way you should be thinking about design is always on behalf of your readers. The questions you should be asking are, how can I visually present the information in the document in a way that will make it both pleasing and more accessible to my reader? If you have any questions about any of this information.
Okay, everybody. Now, I have a question for you. What do you take away from watching this document? What do you take away from it? What do you take away? What do you learn?
I think that well, about this video you learn a lot, because then you learn how to organize. How to create a pattern for your work projects page, and also designing the effective headings for your work documents. And I show you how to organize, how to better organize your documents according to the principle of the element of the effective document design.
Yes, well said. Who else? What do you learn, folks? So I do my best to provide you with all these good things. I know, you know, you're receiving them. I know you understand them when you talk, like Manuel just did. So what do you learn? What did you learn from watching the second video?
So I learned that, you know, how the page layout pretty much, because we're learning about designing a document, you know, how to create a title with the right spacing and all that. So it'll look better and easier for the reader. And, you know, what fonts to use. With like the serif font, I had no idea that should be used for a heading. So it's all good, and it'll be really good to use it in the document that I'm writing.
Yeah, good. What about you, Ashley?
I thought it was very informative on how to talk to the readers more than just writing to write.
Presentation is very important. How you organize your document is very important. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And is it cool for you to combine what you learned from the first video to what you learned from the second video? You see, they're not talking. They're two videos about the document design, but they're talking about document design in different ways. You know what I mean? So when you write your document for this class or for the workplace, you have to have in mind, you know, the what you learn from the first video and what you learn from the second video. But the good news is not even over. I have so many more goodies for you with respect to document design. As the semester goes on, and I will keep unveiling them, and you will keep learning from them. And before you know it, you'll be experts, you know, when you have to write a document. And one of the things we'll be talking about at some point is about online document design. Let me repeat that again. Online document design. Sometimes you have to write a document. You may decide, okay, to write it for online publication. But there are certain principles of document design you have to take into consideration when you're creating a technical document that will be read by people from all over the world online. Able to understand that? So these are good things. You're learning every time you come here, but what should make you excited is, as you're learning, think about what I'm asking you to do. Think about the documents you have to write for this class. And then think about how you will apply the new knowledge to what you do to make your documents for this class and for the workplace stand out, to make them ready for prime time. So let's take a deep breath here, people. When you open a user manual or any technical documents online or any paper-based technical documents, you say to yourself, wow, this is well done. But think about the design, the principle of document design that make them user-friendly, that make them easy for readers to understand. And the purpose is also very important. When you write technical documents, you're not just writing these documents so that they can look good. They can look beautiful. Well, So the key is to write them to make them easy for the reader. Does that make sense? Presentation matters. That's the key part. You want your documents to be user-friendly. You want the message you want to communicate, you want that message to come across successfully. Design is a good part of that, okay? It's not just about beauty. Does that make sense? It's about making the document effective. So when you talk about document design, as the two professors just said, well, you have to have your audience in mind. The people gonna use the document. Put yourself in their shoes and then decide exactly how you want to present the information. Yes or no?
Yes.
If you know these principles, you have a leeway in terms of what you want to do, but people who don't know what you know now, they will just guess, and that will not work. You have to know the principles. Yes or no?
Yes.
Apply them.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay, you want to say something, man? Okay.
Yeah, I think I do have better understanding now how to set up my project. I mean, I already have a lot of, I almost finished with the project with the, but now I have to review it again and make sure that it has the principles and the elements to make it more effective for the reader.
Yes,
Yes.
Perfect. You said very well. That's you, ladies and gentlemen. You have impressed me every time I come here. You have expressed yourself very well. You have said so many great things, so many insightful things that make me think you are leveraging the learning experience. There was no doubt in my mind. The documents that you be producing for this class, or you have already produced for this class. When I see them, I would think that they're great. They stand out, and probably you understand why I've allowed you to submit anything for this class, to revise and revise again, to submit anything for this class by December 19. Well, since throughout the semester, you're going to keep learning. So as you learn, you can go back to what you have already produced. Yes or no? And
yes.
make them effective. Does that make sense? Apply the new knowledge to them. That's what it's about. So that's the reason why for me, I've been teaching for 25 years. That's the reason why for me, the final deadline is very important. It's not the initial deadline that's important, the final one. That's allow students to keep improving their works. For me, it's all about learning. It's not just about meeting a specific deadline. It's about giving my students the opportunity to do their best. Okay? For them to do their best, they have to be given the opportunity that to revise and revise and revise and revise and revise, to keep learning and learning and learning and learning and applying what they have learned to the documents. That's what it's about. And we always say practice makes perfect. So the more they practice these principles, the better they understand them. And as a result, the better communicators they are. And before I close this chapter, for now, I want to touch on something the professor talked about. He said, and that's true. I don't know whether I mentioned that before. Nowadays, many professionals, many professional communicators, instead of talking about technical writing, instead of talking about technical writing, you know what they talk about? The different name, technical communication. Let me read that again. What the difference? between technical writing and technical communication. Okay? You want me to explain that to you? Okay, when people say technical writing, the focus is on the writing precisely, writing as brief as you can. Does that make sense? Writing in a straightforward way, but is taking this stuff should be beyond writing. It's also about presentation. Yes or no? About is sometimes people say it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. It's not just what you write in technical writing. It's about the presentation of your work. So because of that, because the principle of document design should be part of the big picture, should be a big part of the big picture. The best thing to say is technical communication. Technical communication is a better name than technical writing. Okay? Technical communication. Because when you say technical communication, you can see the two parts. You can see writing as well as presentation. That's what technical communication.
Okay.
Everybody understand that? Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going to close the class with something else. So you know what? We just learn about technical principle of technical design. I'm going to give you a refresher of technical writing style. I'm going to play a different video for you. So everybody pay attention. This video we're going to watch is as important as the two videos you just watched. So pay attention to it and learn from it. Okay, this is the last video we're going to play today. Really pay attention. It's going to be there. 1 second.
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want, and you never need to pick up a camera or use any fancy editing software. With Doodly, you drag.
Hello and welcome all. I am Pallavi Gharami. I'm here with one more video on the subject effective technical communication. Today our topic of discussion is technical writing style and language from module 1. So let's see what is in it. Before we learn about the writing style and language of technical writing, let's discuss the definition and the uses of technical writing. As you can see, the slide reads, technical writing is a type of writing where the author is writing about a particular subject that requires direction, instruction or explanation. This style of writing has a very different purpose and different characteristics than other writing styles such as creative writing or academic writing or business writing. So, we can say that technical writing is straightforward and easy to understand explanation of a particular project, process, topic or phenomenon. It explains clearly how something works, and technical writing differs from other forms of writing including, as I have said here, academic writing or business writing or any kind of writing on entertainment. So technical writing follows a non-personal style and descriptive narrative. And we have to remember the audience of the text or document plays a vital role in determining the style and language of a piece of technical writing. So it is not written to impress, it is written to express. Very important. And it aims at providing clear and useful information to the targeted audience. So we have to remember that also a good technical writer can make a difficult task easy and can quickly explain a complex piece of information. Let's now see what the uses of our technical writing are. The subject for technical writing, it says there are two types of subject. It's tangible as well as abstract, and I have already said that it's straightforward, easy to understand explanation, and it is an efficient and clear way of explaining something and how it works. So what is the meaning when I say, what does it mean when I say that the subject of technical writing can either be tangible or abstract? So tangible is something that can be seen or touched, such as a computer or software program, or information on how to assemble a piece of furniture. And when I say abstract, it means something that involved a series of steps that aren't related to a tangible object. One example, this might be steps required to complete an office process. After this, we also have some examples of technical writing, such as instruction manuals, policy manuals, process manuals, user manuals, report of analysis, instructions for assembling a product, a summarization of a long report that highlights and shortens the most important elements. In the video about the different types of technical writing, I have discussed all these types of technical writings in details. Let's now see the different technical writing style. So, a good technical writer can make a difficult task easy, as I have already said earlier, and can quickly explain a piece of information. Now, these following points they help in achieving the appropriate writing style in technical documents. The first one is audience analysis. So, the technical writing may include certain words, phrases, abbreviations related to the subject of writing. But whoever is writing, that is the author, should ensure that the languages, the words, the phrases, the abbreviations that they have used, that is it is easy for the audience to comprehend such terms. Now, this can be done by explaining or describing the terms in simplest language possible. So, good technical writing improves the reading experience. Now, let's see the second one, that is impersonal style. So, the technical writing should follow an impersonal style of narrative. It should be done from the third person's perspective, and technical writing should not include opinions of the author. Rather, it should be based on facts and research. Next is make it informative. So, you should try and make your piece of technical writing a very informative one, and the technical writing should not aim to argue or entertain. The purpose of the technical writing is just straightforward, providing information. So the focus should lie on detailing and imparting facts to the reader. That makes it informative. Now the fourth one says the writing should be straightforward. I have discussed this earlier. Again, I'm saying that it should be to the point and as simple as possible to make sure the reader understands the process or instruction. So this at times may appear as simply a list of steps to take to achieve the desired goal, or it may be a short or lengthy explanation of a concept or any abstract idea, but it should be to the point. Okay, next is educate the reader. Now we should avoid emotive or flowery language. Rather, whatever message you want to impart, it should be imparted in an intellectual and factual manner. The reference points that you use should refer to the subject instead of the writer. That's how you educate the reader. Now the next point is very, very much important. It says that keep your writing concise. Technical writing should be concise. It should use only as many words as are necessary. Enough details must be provided, but there should be economy in usage of words. Unnecessary descriptions bores the reader, so that must be avoided. The seventh point says we must ensure clarity in writing. The message that the author wants to convey to the reader should be clearly understandable. The author should ensure that every phrase or the abbreviation is clearly explained. It should not be a document that requires a manual, to understand the meaning or the information that is given. Okay, so it should be clear. The writing should be clear. Acha. The eighth one says conduct extensive research. Now, when we are about to write a technical document, we should gather information from a number of sources and understand the information that you have gathered. so that it can be analyzed thoroughly, and then put the information in an easy way to understand, format to instruct those who read it. The more inexperienced your audience, the more information you will need to gather and explain and reach their level. The ninth point says evaluate the writing. Though not, the ninth point says, though not mentioned here, we must always keep in mind, since it's a tiny little thing, but it is important, that is evaluate the writing. The writing should go through the various stages like revision, editing, and proofreading to make it effective one. So all these things should be kept in mind to follow a definite style of writing. Next, the present slide is about technical writing language. Now, technical writing is usually formal in style, and the language is also formal, and also the presentation is formal. So here I have given the few rules that were framed by George Orwell on the language of technical writing. So these rules will make your technical writing much more formal and comprehensible. It says, never use a metaphor, simile, oxymoron, or figures of speech. And then it says, never use a long word where a short one works. And always use active voice in writing. Never use foreign word or phrase, scientific term, or a jargon if its regular English equivalent is available. Apart from all this, few exceptions are also there for technical writing, which is related to all these points which I have written here. If the audience habitually uses figures of speech, the author can use it too. That is one thing, exception. If the scientific jargon is a standard, the author can use it or must use it. And the third exception is that once a term or word is explained, it becomes usable in the document and can be consistently used thereafter. So if there are these rules which have been framed by George Orwell, there are exceptions also which we need to keep in mind. Let's see what's next. The next slide is about few tips on the language use. So the first tip says technical writing should be clear. That means the use of words that the audience understands should be made use. For example, unclear. The unwise walking about upon the area near the cliff edge may result in dangerous fall, and therefore it is recommended that one remains a safe distance to maintain personal history. So this I have read out from a text, and this sentence is really unclear. Now, in a very simple language, it should say, danger, stay away from the cliff. The next tip says that we should use simple active voice sentences. So active voice clearly shows the subject in the sentence. It is the standard for technical writing, any kind of technical writing. Suppose if we write, the report was submitted by them. This is in passive voice. Now active voice, see how it makes it more clear. They submitted the report. So passive voice sometimes, obscures the subject. It is ambiguous and often leaves out important information. So that's why active voice is much more preferred over passive voice. Now again, there are few verbs which cannot be used in passive voice, that is appear, arrive, come, cry, die, go. This should be always used in again active voice. Then third point says keep the sentence structure simple. Now we all know that simple sentences help to convey the information much more easily. So the most important information should be placed at the beginning of the sentence. Okay, let me give you an example. This sentence, a large number of saplings are also required for the plantation drive. Now this sentence can be simply written as plantation drive requires saplings. So it's a simple sentence. The structure is simple. So what happens is, why is it said to avoid long sentences? Long sentences actually tax the brain and make the retention of information a little bit difficult. And simple sentences can be made with one clause only. So that's why, and sufficient information is also given through the simple sentences. So that's why keep the sentence structure simple. Next tip says avoid the obvious in technical writing. So the author should understand the audience's technical level and write accordingly. That's all about it. Eliminate redundancy. Now we already know what is redundancy. Redundant prepositional phrases are there, and they make the text long and tiresome to read. Often these prepositional phrases, what I mean by saying is that it's a combination of preposition with noun phrase. So it is recommended that you use simpler words replacing prepositional phrases. For example, the lightning struck all of a sudden. So this phrase can simply be rewritten as the lightning struck suddenly. So that's important. An elaborate phrase is never beneficial in technical writing. Next is, we should avoid verbosity and pomposity. So technical writing, we know, is a very informative piece of writing. So every word must contribute meaning to the sentence. Do not begin sentence with in order to, by using the word in order to, or by saying each and every. Okay, it is better to give instructions in a plain and simple language for specific audience. And technical writing is not actually the place to show off how linguistic you are. Not showing off linguistic abilities. It should be simple. Next is, we should avoid cliches. So cliches are actually outdated way of writing, which is usually the writers attempt to impress the readers. Very similar to the previous point or the tip that I explained. Original and clear writing is considered better than any form of writing. Okay, so someone has rightly said, actually, the best English is plain English. So write exactly what is to be conveyed, and do not use this uncomfortable language. Avoid using those. Now, use acronyms and abbreviations carefully. Okay, so actually the use of acronyms and abbreviations should be minimal. If they are to be used, full definition should be given at their first use only. The next tip says use dictionaries and grammar checkers. So for best results for your technical writing, you must always use dictionaries. This alleviates words in passive voice, unnecessary repetition, grammar and spelling errors. Okay. The next tip says use style manuals. Now what happens is, when you use a style manual, it helps the writer to follow the rules and conventions of writing. So we all know that technical writing often follows a standard format or style. So writers from academic institutions or professional organizations and corporations use these style guides. Here the list says there are major style guides that can be used. They are Associated Press Style Book. Then we have Chicago Manual of Style, and then last one, the Microsoft Manual of Style, which is used widely by technical writers for computer specific issues. This was briefly about the language and style of technical writing. We should abide by all the rules and points that I have discussed and try and make our technical writing a good and perfect one. Hope that was clear to all of you. Thank you.
Okay, that was cool. So you learned a lot today.
Hey there, in this video, we'll be talking about some of the most...
Okay, we learned a lot today. hopefully everything that I've been learned will be used. There is a last thing I want to tell you. I would like each one of you to open the syllabus and see my office hours and go to navigate and schedule an appointment with me this month so that I can gauge your progress. So when I meet with you, I can meet with you for 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, it depends. So I want to gauge your progress, to talk to you a little bit. You will do the same in November, you will do the same in December. If you cannot schedule an appointment and navigate, just email me your available time, I will schedule, okay? Navigate will send an email to you with the link, with the Zoom link. If you go to navigate, you realize on the time slot I booked, you can email me your available time. I will schedule you as well. Okay, everybody do that. That's all for today. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.